I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. In 2006, Loretta Veney's mom was diagnosed with dementia. She began immediately learning everything she could about the disease and becoming a big advocate for her mom in the process. Loretta and her mom have been featured in articles with the Wall Street Journal, Psychology Today, the Washington Post, the New York Times, AARP Caregiver Stories, as well as a PBS special. Loretta was also selected Trailblazer of the Year by Johns Hopkins Medicine, who she continues to do her work with. She is able to share her positivity with us, her humor, all that she's learned, and her personal story and perspective as we dive into learning more about dementia and also looking at her incredible work with Lego bricks and caregivers and how it greatly can positively impact them. Here is my conversation with Loretta. Hi, Loretta. Thank you so much. I just was so drawn to your energy and your vibrance, and I really was looking forward to our conversation today. I hear all the time from different caregivers that I interact with that once they receive that diagnosis or they learn that their loved one has Alzheimer's and dementia, they're just like, okay, what's next? What do we do? What does this journey look like? And I just think you're just the perfect person for us to talk to today. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nicole. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to just get started by, can you tell us a little bit about you and what brought you into this important work?
That's such a great question. And it's one of those questions, nobody really plans for this. You do not wake up one day and says, oh, I want to learn more about Alzheimer's. Nobody does.
Right. So true.
So in 2006, after observing quite a few unusual things in my mom, Doris, and I said, okay, it's time. She had mentioned a neurologist anyway, and I never was clear if she had actually gone or what, but I was like, okay, it's time for us to do that. So really simple things. In my book, Being My Mom's Mom, I talk a lot about the chapter. It was the little things at first. So it was a whole lot of little things. She would misplace her checkbook. We've all done that. But, when you add them all together, and I think the big sign for me that I chose to ignore was my mother's favorite thing to do was go to exercise class in her non-assisted living retirement community. Mm-hmm. And she went to 3 or 4, but Tai Chi, that was her all-time favorite. And I called her one day from work to say, hey, how was Tai Chi class? And she didn't say a word. And then she says, oh, I was so busy, I forgot to go. I remember distinctly calling my sister and telling my sister that. And my sister said, what was she doing? And I have no idea, because my mother was the kind of person, she didn't miss Tai Chi for anybody. Mm-hmm. If you would say, oh, Mom, let's go to lunch tomorrow. Oh, no, Tai Chi day, no lunch. I'm like, well, we're going to be back way before Tai Chi starts. Tai Chi didn't start till like 3 o'clock anyway. But she would always say, well, maybe there'd be traffic. So the fact that she missed Tai Chi should have been a huge red flag for us. And we did talk about it, but we also ignored it. And then so the little things eventually turned into one really big thing. So that's what brought us to the doctor's office. And then of course you hear the terms, you were in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, and, sheer panic and all the other things that go along with that. And, I'm such a positive person and joyful, as you pointed out, but, it's so hard to find joy during the midst of that. So, but I was searching for something really positive to say. So my mother said, oh, that's really bad, isn't it? And I, as positively as I can, I'm trying to say there are worse things. And my mother looked right at me and said, well, I don't know what's worse than not being able to remember anything or anybody. And, she was right. You can't really take that from her. So the only thing I could really promise her on that day that we hear that dreaded word was that whatever happened, and who knows what was going to happen, but whatever happened, we were going to do it together. That was the only promise I could make her that day. And here we are 15 years later. So, and, she was 77 when she was diagnosed, and, lover of reading and all kind of learning new things and all kinds of stuff like that. And, it just robs you of all of that. So the first thing you want to do is, as you said, where to start. And so for me, you had never paid attention to it before, but I was like, what's that name of that thing? Alzheimer's Association. So you get on there, and that's kind of the start for most people.
Right.
Is there. Where to go, what to do.
Yeah, the go-to. And you said first heard those words, you had so many questions, and your mom's, there's so many different emotions. And you kind of did the first thing that most people do, which is, okay, where can I get more information?
Sure. And I always tell people probably the very first thing you can do, because I don't think Alzheimer's Association necessarily, if you're shocked by that term, I don't think that's the first thing you do. So I usually always tell people, you can remember, you're driving down the street and you might drive by the Department of Aging or your county, Office on Aging or whatever they're called. And that's usually the first place people go. What do I do? This is what the doctor said. And you start there, because they can very easily point you to, state programs, your own individual county program. I live 1.5 miles from my county's Department of Aging, Social Services, all that, family service, all in the same building. And they have all the adult day stuff there. And so I had driven by it thousands of times. So that was, and at the time, my mother still lived in the District of Columbia, but still, I wanted to know what I should be doing. And I eventually moved her to the county where I live for financial reasons. There was not one thing I could afford for her in the District of Columbia. So, so I think, and that drives a lot of what families have to do too. You have to make some very interesting financial decisions early on, because I don't think anybody plans for 15 years, which is where we are right now. If you think about the types of, dementia, Alzheimer's is the most popular type, or the most occurring type, with 50 to 75% of the folks having, the Alzheimer's. So I always tell people it's like an umbrella. So right away, you want to kind of know which, what kind of, my family have. And so you start to look at that. And my mother's neurologist didn't name it per se. He just said, he started off with the mild cognitive impairment. You're like, what's that? And so it's just like it sounds too. It is very mild, nothing to worry about at that time, but then it gets, bigger. But everybody wants to know, well, is it Alzheimer's? Because, when you think Alzheimer's, you're thinking it's going to be fatal, but it isn't going to be tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? So I have always said to people, it's not a death sentence. A lot of people see it that way. It is, and yes, that's probably what they're going to die from. But again, it is not going to be tomorrow. And so you can still do all the same things. So if you're looking at the stages of, dementia, the mild thing, I say, don't change a thing. You might have to walk her to the exercise class, but she can still go. And so I said, don't change a thing. If they like to shop and knit and do jigsaw puzzles, yeah, she can probably still do the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles that, so don't change anything. When they get to the later stages, the mild stage, moderate stage, and then the later stages, they can still do puzzles, but now, there are all kinds of Alzheimer's puzzles out there. Now there are 50 pieces or 36 pieces. So you don't have to really change all the things they love, So I tell people, don't panic, just, make adjustments as they change. Don't make them change all the way. Oh, mama, just sit in this chair and wait.
Right.
Wait for what?
Yeah.
Wait for what? And that really bothers me when I see family, and it is panic. Yeah. And then some of it, just to be honest, some of it is also embarrassment. Mm-hmm. It's still a stigma attached to it. Oh no, don't tell anybody. When I first started approaching some of the churches to say, can we talk about Alzheimer's and some forums so people could be better prepared than I was? I was so shocked by the diagnosis. So I think if we get out to these mega churches and other things, and let's talk about it, have a forum. And the pastor would say, oh no, we don't have that here. And you're thinking, If you look at the people who are sitting on the first few rows,
Right.
they don't have any idea where they are.
Exactly.
But if you want to hold to that story and that works for you, go right ahead.
Right.
And so, but until it impacts them, I had a pastor who I had talked to 2 years before call me in the pain. Could you come over here and discuss Alzheimer's? And then they were like, 10 pastors between, the lowest level and him way up here. And so, and then he called me directly. So you knew it was somebody in his family.
Personal.
Now all of a sudden you want to talk about it. So I think that stigma is something else we really have to work on, because that is a thing that really hinders honest, frank discussion about how much is this going to cost? Where is mom or dad or grandma going to live? All of these kinds of questions that come up, because your initial point was so true. There's millions of questions. At the time, my mother lived alone, and you have to be asking yourself, how long will she be able to do that? And the answer is always, it depends. Yeah. In my mother's case, it was 3 years, but that's not for everybody. I got on the checking account right away. And it's probably one of the first things I did, but I didn't try to start writing all the checks right away. I was just on there if needed. She wrote a $10,000 check. I wanted to know to who, which, as you know, lots of people do. I'm in a support group where someone's parent, gave a neighbor, $10,000 or $15,000, and then the neighbor wouldn't give it back. They knew it was because they had dementia and they wouldn't give it back. And so it became a big case and everything. So you don't have to make changes right away, but you can put some things in place that will prepare some of what is coming.
The personal story and connection and your perspective is so valuable, because you've walked this road and it's been such a part of your life, and you've been able to encourage other people. It's getting all that information, having open, frank conversation about it, so helpful. If we're talking about, because you had mentioned your doctor for your mom had shared that it was the cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's, dementia, but didn't necessarily talk about a certain type. And I think families get a little confused. Could you tell us, what is Alzheimer's? What are those different types of dementia that exist? They'll obviously have to do that legwork with their doctor, but just kind of giving us an idea of what's happening.
Sure. So dementia is like the umbrella. So you think of yourself standing under this umbrella, and the umbrella is called dementia. And then there are various types that fall under that umbrella. So people are most familiar with the Alzheimer's type, and that tends to more often than not progress a little more quickly than dementia. And it can be, fairly quick, 3 or 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, hard to say, but it is what they're going to, die of. So it can have a lot of behavioral changes. And as I said earlier, so somewhere around 50 to 75% of the people who have dementia have the Alzheimer's type. It is the most common type. Then there's also something called vascular dementia, which the next group, 20 to 30% of the folks who have dementia have that type. And one of the most stunning things about vascular dementia is sometimes, it's a series of strokes that causes it or other something, but it's a very abrupt onset. In my mother's case, just the plain old dementia, I guess, or whatever we were told, things happened very, very slowly. And she stayed in that beginning stage for several years, and then the middle stages for like 8 years, which is a long time. And so, but the vascular is so abrupt. So like, for example, one of the people in the support group that I'm in, their dad went in for knee surgery, woke up with Alzheimer's, I guess caused by the anesthesia. And so some of them happen just that way. You go into the hospital for something and you come out with something else, and his memory was never the same after that. And so, in that case, in vascular, they have these things called stepwise deterioration, which is you have some traumatic event and the person's never the same after that. And my mother's youngest sister's death, diagnosis very suddenly, she had colon cancer, but my mother was the oldest and my aunt was the youngest, and there were 19 years between them, and my mother couldn't process why she didn't die first. And her stepwise deterioration was so dramatic as a result of my aunt's death that by the time a week later, when we had the funeral, my mother didn't recognize all the people that they had grown up with. And so people were stunned by that. So not only were they at my funeral, they felt like they had lost my mother too. And some people come out of those deteriorations and other people don't. My mother never recovered from that. And so she just sort of stayed at that platform. And then there are a lot of behavioral changes and that kind of thing. I think the thing that is the type that is the most scary is what they call Lewy body. It sounds mean, and it is mean. It is, it's probably the type of dementia that results in the most placements in a memory care community, because sometimes their behavior gets so violent, they think they're seeing ghosts and they think they're killing a ghost and they're actually strangling their spouse or something. A very dear friend of mine whose husband had early onset Alzheimer's in his 40s, she put him in a memory care community almost right away because she was afraid he would hurt their small children. And it was a horrific decision for her to make, but she had to, do that. He had pushed her at one point and she didn't, fall down the stairs or anything like that, but it told her that's probably going to be an action she needed to take. So a lot of those kinds of things, the inability to find the right words, but mostly the Lewy body is scary just because of the delusions, and they fall a lot more than other people. They are off balance and things like that. And then the frontal temporal dementia is the same kind of percentage as Lewy body, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the types of dementia of folks get that type. And that's usually a lot of disinhibitions, sort of show themselves. People would take their clothes off all of a sudden. You're like, what? That's so unlike Mary or whatever. And so a lot of very abrupt personality changes. You used to love book club and all of a sudden, I don't read, now you just binge watch Netflix, which you had never seen in your life. So it's like, wow, that's so weird. Or, just all the things that you used to love, now you dislike intensely or whatever. And the speech loss patterns are different. So those are the four more, most common types of dementia: the Alzheimer's, the vascular, Lewy body, and then frontal temporal. And they say that there's really no real way to say for certain that that's what you die of until you're actually dead, and they do that. So a lot of my friends, people my age, have started to already write their wishes that they want to donate their brain to science. And I am one of them, because I think when you're a child of someone that has dementia, your greatest fear, of course, is getting it. Yeah. And so, whatever I can do, like, I'm trying to avoid that. And and I think I'm not paranoid about it, but I certainly have a lot of journals where I write out not only what goes on with my mom, but also the things you want to remember, like that. I always thought about that as another book, things I don't want to forget. Yeah. It is, and so, I think every child has that fear when you have a parent.
Right. You're watching that play out and wondering, okay, is that the future? And it doesn't always end up that way, but it's the question of that.
Yes.
It is so unique to each person. So for the sake of today, we'll be speaking in more generalized terms, and we will let our listeners know where to find you and get in touch with you if people have more detailed questions and really want to dive in. You're a great resource for that. So starting with, I've heard from families, there's kind of two different routes they take, where they don't want to know, out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to know the reality, kind of that denial. But then also, I really want to know, and I want to know all of the information so I know what direction we're going in. So if we're taking that route today of knowing all the information, you mentioned this a little bit before, but what's the first thing we should do? Where should we begin? What are those good questions to ask?
Sure. I think when you're trying to plan, I think having a plan is the most important thing we can do. So the first thing you want to do, you gather the family. I think everybody sit down, and as you mentioned the word honest, we have to have an honest conversation. My sister and I, had never talked with, our mom, well, where do you want to live when you get old? Because not only they can answer that question. The only thing my mother told us for sure is that she never wanted to live with us. So she made us sign a document.
Usually it's kind of,
that we would not make her do that. But that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. So You can, if you're driving down the street and you see this brand new assisted living or memory care place, you say, oh, that place is gorgeous. That's where I want to do. I tease my own daughter by taking pictures and sending it to her. Here, honey, this is where I want to live when I get old. And,
That's a good
it's like really
idea.
expensive. And she's like,
Yeah.
Mom, do you like that one more than the one you sent last week? And so it's really kind of funny. But when you have that discussion, it needs to be honest. And so he said, that's a very nice building. Yes, but I don't think we have the funds for that. So you have to really be honest and upfront about it. Look at what and a lot of times, especially if it's your parent, if it's your spouse, that's different. But then a parent, they don't want to tell you their financial stuff all the time. I've had friends who discover way too late that their parents had a second mortgage on the house that nobody knew about. That impacts your ability to do a variety of things. So sit, plan, and then have a backup plan. The first thing I did was look at, I knew my mother wasn't going to be able to live by herself forever. That was for sure. So I started to look at where next for her. She wasn't ever she wouldn't like these huge high-rise assisted living places. So I looked at a group home for her to have like the family dynamic kind of thing. So start to look at, if it comes to that, where does she go next? And then where next? And then as she starts to not be able to do things for herself, where do I get the, shirts that, clothes with the Velcro as opposed to buttons, because they get so frustrated when they can no longer do certain tasks, tying their shoes or pulling up the pants and then trying to fill with a zipper. So that's when you go to the pants with elastic. So just know what the changes are going to be and be prepared. Don't run all around. Yes, Walmart has those pants with the elastic. So you don't have to go and stock up on everything, but just start to look around. Hey, we're going to need that one day. Not going to be today, but you are going to get to that point where you just want those slip-on shoes so they don't fall because their shoe is untied and those kind of things. And yes, they don't always like those things, the Velcro, and we know that, but it always is about safety and about care and those kinds of things. And I think when you have those honest discussions, that was what comes out. When I finally told my mom she had to move for her non-assisted living place, her response was, on the last day that we're leaving, we're holding hands, and she got ready to step over the threshold, and she says, I'll be good. Please don't make me move, as if she had done something bad and I was making her move. So you have to explain. Now, I was a security person most of my life. And so it was always about protecting people. So I used, because she remembered what I did for a living, she was still able to equate her safety is why you're moving. Not because you left, a few months ago, you left the stove on. Oh, I did. And, you could burn down this whole place and all your friends would be gone. Oh, yeah. And then she couldn't find her way back to her apartment after dinner, which was on the first level. So she sat outside the dining hall looking around, like if she sat there long enough, she would remember where her place was. And so you recount those kinds of things to let them know why we're moving them. And it has nothing to do with being bad. So I think the purpose and the productivity around a family meeting, to have those kinds of discussions, and not so that we're all going to gang up on you, but we're going to explain, our care for you, and this is why we're doing different things. So I think that's the process. And the financial thing was a huge issue for me, because they lived so long in our family. My great grandmother lived to be 106.
Wow, what a
lived
legacy.
by herself to 101.
Good genetics, my goodness.
So, and my grandmother only died at 98 because she had colon cancer, and they thought she was so healthy she could do surgery and chemo and be fine. And she was like, oh no, I'm not doing none of that. And so she died. So when my mother was diagnosed at 77, I'm adding in my head 77, 87, 97. So 20 some years we could go with this thing. So I'm thinking, And so my first fear, and the whole reason why I wrote the first book, is I plan to use it, to pay for my mother's care. And that's what I did. And people who are not in that situation, it's scary, because I knew my mother was going to run out of money the minute she moved from that non-assisted living place where she had a subsidy. And the minute she moved into this group home, it took her retirement check plus money out of her savings account. And it didn't take but 2 years for that savings account to go to zero. So my husband and I Started out paying just a couple $100, then $500, then $750, and that got all the way up to $1,500 a month. And I had waited way too long. And this is the benefit of using your state and county programs. If I had signed my mother up for the same type of subsidy she had in her first apartment, if I had put her name on the list, but you don't want to take away service. Oh, she doesn't need that now. Put your name on the list now, because by the time your name gets to the top of the list, you will need it. And just all kinds of disastrous things happen between that. So when I was first paying $1,500 a month for her care, and of course she would pay countless money, it doesn't matter, it's your mother. But it was really easy when my husband was alive. And then when he died suddenly, who knew my mother would outlive my husband? Well, when he died suddenly, that $1,500 on one income got to be, I did it, but so we were on that waiting list 8 years and 6.5 months. There were 23,000 people on the list in front of us when I put her name on that list. And I waited 3 years. She was diagnosed in 2006. As I said, I didn't put her name on the list until 2009. And our name came up in 2018. July of 2018 was the last $1,500 payment I'm putting for her care. And there are thousands of people out there, Nicole, in that same situation where they're either deciding between, am I going to have lunch today, or I'm going to get my prescriptions, or I'm going to pay this rent. And, and when Alzheimer's comes into the mix, it makes all those kinds of decisions even worse. And so that's the first thing I would say. Where are we financially? Because this disease is expensive. So where do we need to be? Where are we now? And what realistically can we do with that? After the financial piece, I think the next piece is, where are all the documents? Is there a DNR? There's an unclear DNR in my mother's case. And there's also a form called the MOS, which is the living, what all you want, all the measures to be done. And you have that to fill out. And just where are all those kinds of living wills, all that stuff, who has the power of attorney, all those things you need in a place. You need to know where they all are before an emergency. If you look at the United States right now and just look at all the, types of storms we've had and wildfires, and people got to move, evacuate, go ahead. You cannot be running around looking for, where's that form? Where's the prescriptions? Where are all these things? Have it all in one place. That I love the fact that lots of people, and I did this for a living, have one of those go bags with everything in it. And so all of my mother's documentation is on my phone. Every single piece of everything about her, the time she has been in the hospital, what she was there for, what happened as a result of that. I have many notes in there. And as you know, most of these medical facilities have portals now where you can go and look at the information, see the x-ray, have access to all of that before you need it. And as you said, the preparation piece of it, that covers almost everything. So that's some of the order that I think people should go, the financial piece first, and then the preparation in terms of all the documents and those kind of things. And then start to look at, when I say have a backup plan, I mean, my mother's in a group home now, but suppose the group home closes. A lot of group homes have gone, and other facilities have gone under in the pandemic. Look at that. Your favorite restaurant's not there anymore, or that adult daycare center closed and they say it's not going to reopen. So what's your backup plan for those kinds of things? And so I have to be honest, Nicole, I never once considered backup plan until my husband died, because you're like, whoo, got her in that adult day program. Woo, I'm happy. But again, what happens if they close? I got so many calls when the adult day programs all started to close because of COVID. And people call me, Loretta, give me some activities. Mama's home all day. I don't know what to do with them.
It changed our world. Yeah.
It did. I wrote in 6 days the program called Engaging Activities for Every Alzheimer's Stage. I've done that thing 47 times since COVID started.
Oh,
and I have this big table behind my desk, and I'm showing all these activities, and people are like, woo, and, and it's not even stuff you have to run out and buy because things, people don't have extra money to be buying activities. Some of the stuff you can make at home, or, things like that. So I try to show all that. But again, that was born out of need. But the more we plan and have a backup plan, what do I do if, what can I do if, then, and have that backup plan, because you may really need it. And I never thought about that, as I said, until my husband died. And I put he did everything for my mother, drove her everywhere, all that. I had to buy a new car after he died because he had taught my mom to get in this huge SUV he had. I had this little teeny sporty Cadillac that she couldn't get in. And I literally had to buy a car right after he died because she had an upcoming appointment that I took 6 months to get. And I wasn't going to cancel it. So I had to get a car.
The things
And
we
so
think about.
did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
That would never cross your mind
no.
before that.
And
Yeah.
that's why it's so helpful that you can share that with us, because we might not be there yet. We might have it be a part of our future. We might be in the midst of it, but we can pull out all those tips and things that make life a little bit easier. I was
Yes.
really liked how you talked about preparation in terms of those different categories, looking
Yes.
at living situations, looking at get those paperwork in order, those
Yes.
legal affairs. That's really helpful. I think families can start to, if we can think about it in each of those different components, then
Yes.
we can start to say, all right, what do I need? I might have this taken care of, but I still need to look at this.
And that's so true. And one of the other things I would add to that, if you have these family meetings, I would say have them early on. My mother could still say for a long time what she wanted. And what I mean by that is my mother's now in hospice. And, you know, people feel, some people love it. Other people are like, oh, no, that's a death sentence. No, they help you. They're the most helpful organizations out there. But let that person who is the subject of the conversation have a say as well. And then no, none of the siblings are fighting, you know, when that person can no longer speak for themselves. So I would say get all that out in the open too. I knew 100% sure my mother was a huge fan of hospice because when my grandmother got colon cancer, we bought in hospice. We had a little appointment schedule. People could come, all the grandkids came and sang, and the neighbors came, you know, everybody had a different day, and people sang and did dances, and we just had a little party for like 4.5 months. And my mother was sitting there, and there were no tubes, and my grandmother was as happy as she could be. And my mother said at least 100 times, that's what I want when it's my time. And she said it over. And so and when they told me my mother was in liver failure in March,
Right.
she only had days to live. I called in hospice and insisted she be taken back to the group home. Of course, she failed to get the memo that she was dying because she's still here. And it'll be 6 months next week. So she clearly did not get the memo. But there was no guilt in me. A lot of people, when they call in hospital, oh, I'm so guilty. I don't know if mama would want that. My mother, I can still hear her saying during the time with my grandmother, that's what I want. Write that down. That's what I want. Y'all hear me? I want that.
Yeah.
So here you go. Now you got it. So there you go. And so the more you do this planning with them while they can still have a say, I think is so important because so many people, you know, families disagree on how to proceed. But if you had that conversation early on, you could avoid all that.
You can. And there's a good part of the disease process where they really can be articulate in what their needs are and what they want.
That's correct. Absolutely.
There's different stages that have been used to describe that dementia journey. And so it's interesting. I'll be a part of a group and a family will say, what are these stages you're talking about now? And where can I learn more? So can you just walk us through what happens in each one briefly and we can better understand what's happening?
Sure. So in when we first got this, there were like 7 stages and people wrote out specific things. And now the Alzheimer's Association just refers to the early stage, middle stage, end stage, or later stage. And that is perfect because I think what people were doing, oh Lord, she's in stage 5. That means next time, then they won't be able to do so-and-so, you know, and I just do not focus at all on all the things she could no longer do because I'd be crazy. I only focus on all the things she can still do, and she can still do a lot. She can write her name. She knows what her name is. She can still respond to it. So I focus on all of that. But in the early stage, as I said earlier, nothing changes. Just keep doing what they can do, things independently, you know, eat all that. When you get into the middle stage, you'll have to start to pay some closer attention. So for example, you know, it's starting to go into fall, but here in DC, it's like 90 degrees today. But anyway, but as the weather changes, that's the first sign. They go outside in a pair of shorts in November. You're like, so when they start to not be able to make those kind of decisions, it's fall, I need a jacket and those kinds of things. So you might have to remind them, hey, you know, you didn't put the milk in the refrigerator, you put it in the cabinet. So you have to start looking at those things. Or they miss appointment dates. They don't pay their rent on time or their mortgage. So those kinds of things, you're like, she's never done that before. Let me start writing the check. So Yeah, some of the signs start to be more pronounced. They start to be able to do less and less things for themselves. So eating, clothing, what they call ADLs, the activities of daily living, and they will get more and more difficult. And then, they might need help with walkers and all that kind of thing, to prevent falls. So you have to pay a lot more attention to them closely. Those are probably the biggest considerations. And then in the later stages, then yes, then they start to lose the ability to do most things. Now, surprisingly, my mother can still feed herself. Where we are, though, is she was having quite a bit of trouble swallowing. We're not sure whether it was her dentures or the actual swallowing mechanism, doesn't matter. And so we started, she's been on pureed food now for about 6 weeks, and she loves it. And she says, my mother has always loved to eat. And so the first clue was that she stopped eating. They had to feed her more, which was, very unlike her. But then the minute, okay, we catch on, this is what I think it is. And the minute they started the puree, she, ate the whole bowl. That was her favorite soup. And so she's still eating what everybody else is eating. Hers is just in a blender. And so she has been in the pens probably 6 years already. And so in hospice, they pay for all of the diapers and all those kinds of things. And so at that stage, you certainly have to pay attention to personal hygiene to make sure, you turn them alive, you can avoid the bed sores, that kind of thing. So they get my mother up at the group home every other day. And because COVID has resurged, then we're doing outdoor visits. Of course, my mother can't go outside. So they get her out of bed every other day. And so she's sitting by the patio door. So I went there, today was my day. So I go there and you stay about 30 to 40 minutes or so. And we play little games and do all kinds of stuff. And so getting her up every other day prevents, again, the sores. And a fancy dancy hospice wheelchair she has goes in like 30 positions. So she's up and back and side, and that also moves you around enough to prevent those sores. So I guess, you could say there's very little she can do, but there's a whole lot she can still do too. Like I said, we play games. Somebody just before we came on, somebody had sent me a thing to say, "Oh, I'm sending your mother some more activities," because they want to see what she thinks. And so, we're popular on Facebook because they're always sending me stuff for her to try out. Oh. And we have a big Lego connection. So we're always doing Lego things and all of that. So I just try to focus on that. So yeah, the stages go from one extreme to the other where they can still do everything alone and to all the way to they can do very little, by themselves. But it could take, as my mother is a great illustration, it can take years. So I tell people, don't sit around. Oh no, they're in the late stages. Okay, but make the most of that day. When I drive away from the group home, my plan is to go away thinking that sure was a lot of fun. Because if this is your last day on earth, I'm gonna look back and say, wow, we sure did have fun with those Lego bricks today. And that's what I'm gonna do. I don't just sit around. I hate that blank stare. We keep her engaged enough that goes back. This is the first Lego house she made. Oh. And, the door open. She made this in 2014. Well, she made other stuff before that, but this was the first actual house that she had made when she no longer knew who I was. And the doors and windows open. She still has the dexterity to do that too. And so I, always make sure we have those kinds of things that she can keep her mind fresh, and we play ball. She can still hold her hands up to catch the ball. And I mean, she can still do a lot of things. And I'm gonna just go with that.
It's that optimism. And I want to hear all about your work with Lego bricks and caregivers. I know it's a big part of the impact that you have.
It is. It was kind of a selfish thing, I'll be honest. So it started, my mother, I didn't know how expensive Legos were, but she bought me all these, plain Lego bricks. I didn't have the sets, but we just built the things that you can make whatever you want. And we did that all through my childhood. And in teenage years, we still built stuff. And I found that my mother talked a lot about herself. And when I first tried to get a sense of what she was thinking and feeling after her diagnosis, she wouldn't say a thing. Oh, it's fine, it's fine. And so, but when I got the Legos out, she talked about how afraid she was. And I used Legos through my entire career. And then, as I said, I was a security person, so I would do emergency planning exercises, and we'd use the little Lego people and the Lego police cars and the emergency and all kinds of things. And you could see your tabletop exercise, whether that was a good evacuation plan or not. And then I started using it a lot just to keep my mom engaged, and we would build different things. And she was having such a good time. I was like, well, my mother always taught us, when you find something that works well, share with other people. And I was thinking, well, this is so much fun for my mom. I wonder if other people would like it. So I started going to this adult day program, and I went, several times a year, and we would build this Lego art. It was just fabulous. We had a good old time, and I just kept it going. And then when COVID showed up, wow, I started doing building and rebuilding joy and hope with Lego bricks. I have to say, Nicole, it was so much more emotional than I thought it would be, because when you have a 3D model in your hand, and this is us doing the virtual visit, you can see me looking through the glass, and there's the caregiver making sure we don't come in.
Yeah.
And this was the green for engagement. They kept them engaged the whole time. But when I put this on LinkedIn, people were like, wow, because you could see her eyes, us looking at each other through the glass. And it was just, such a great thing to have that. And my mother would always share what she was actually thinking and feeling. And so in 2014, when she no longer remembered who I was, I got this, I became a trained facilitator in something called Lego Serious Play. And so this year I dedicated that to the caregivers. And again, it was so emotional, because I think when I said build what has been stealing your joy, and it was always something COVID related. Oh, I can't go to my favorite restaurant, and people would build that. And as people were talking about it, some people cried and all that. And then I would say, well, break that apart and then build what brings you joy. And people would throw the first one on the ground and break it apart, and lots of people cried and all that. And I think it was because it was the first time some people had talked about how they were really feeling. Because I hated it when people say, well, how you doing during COVID? I'm fine.
Right.
We were not fine.
No.
None of us were fine. So I was just like, okay, I'm not fine. I'm gonna just be honest. So, and people were really grasping that. So we would build hope, and we built patience. I'm doing a memory cafe where I asked the person with dementia and then their care partner to build their favorite vacation or their favorite home. And I had a situation where the daughter was they were talking about how to build the home that the daughter grew up in, but the mother was thinking something else. She said, that's not it. And she says, oh no, wow, she's talking about the house she grew up in. Wow. And so you have these mind-blowing experiences. And so one of the adult day programs that I had gone to, well, this was a residential place, but it was the folks in the dementia section, and we were building just art. And this woman built this thing, and I'd never seen anybody turn the Lego bricks upside down. I said, wow, look at that. It's upside down. And she looks at me as if I was crazy. And she says, of course it's upside down. It's just like my brain.
Wow.
Yep. And she had taught physics or some brainy science for 30 some years before dementia. And the fact that she could articulate that, I turned mine upside down. She was the only one in the room that did that. And that was her reason. She knew her brain was upside down. Okay. And I just kept doing it. And so Johns Hopkins, who's one of my largest partners, they've done 4 sessions. I'm doing one tomorrow with their caregivers, and most of them are bringing their care partner, the folks with dementia as well. And so I think finding an outlet for them, for whoever was out there, ours just happened to be Lego bricks. I'm sure people have other activities, train sets or whatever, all these things that people have done for, decades. And then all of a sudden, Alzheimer's shows up. Well, I say, keep doing it as long as you can, because I put a picture up on Facebook day before yesterday with her with the little Lego bricks, me with mine and her with hers, and there we go. And so she doesn't know me from Adam. She can't tell you where she lives. She doesn't know anything about that. She knows she can still click those Lego bricks together though. And that's all I really care about. Yeah. So we keep doing it. Yeah.
That's so, it's empowering because they're able to still do that and connect.
Yes. And not only can she do so, she was having trouble. So there are the 6, these Duplo bricks, which are bigger than the small Lego. She can still do both. And I have pictures of her doing both. And she was having some trouble clicking the last 2 together. And she listens for that click. And when it finally did click, she said, I did that. She's so proud of her. She's so proud of herself. I'm like, yay, we're cheering and everything. So yeah, you can't tell me that that's not a great thing.
Yeah.
So do I wish I had my mother back? Yes, but
Yeah.
that's never going to happen. So I just try to live with what is.
Yeah.
And just to see that little smile that, she's so proud of herself. And she did. So like, you mentioned your kids earlier. And so, it's like when we were little, our parents put all the ugly stuff we made up on the refrigerator,
Totally.
and I feel like doing that, and that's how I put all her pictures up, and everybody named her Wonder Woman. And we put the pictures up because we want to really applaud the stuff they can still do.
Yeah. Those happy in those moments.
Yeah. And I think I give people a lot of hope in that, oh, look, her mother's doing it. Let's see if we can do it. So somebody wrote, where can we get those Legos? So yeah, we do the best we can.
We do. And it's really therapeutic. The things that were coming to mind is like how therapeutic that is, the conversation that can happen, the memories that can be recalled in the childhood, how healing it is. And I just had to laugh when you talked about, we don't really know how expensive Legos are until you start buying them, and you're like,
get the really cheap bag. You go to Target or the dollar store and get we're doing this Lego Serious Play thing. You can just go to buy at the dollar store, just buy a bag, make this little car. You're just not gonna make the car. You're gonna make what Loretta tells you to build. So,
that's really good advice. I know we've got this huge bin at our house of Legos. My husband is like, we are not ever letting those go.
I know.
I know.
Now you tell him he's correct, because I still absolutely have some of the same pieces I had when I was a kid. Lego's the same, age as me, 60, almost 62 years old. Yeah. So, and some of my church friends and other friends have said, okay, my kid moved out, take these Legos. There you go. So I'm putting them all to good use.
Oh,
so
good.
Absolutely.
Good.
And people are thrilled to see, I would have never thought to do that with my mom. But I think the thing that I really was working toward initially was just to get her to talk, because it was scaring me that she wasn't really sharing. And I knew that whether we talked about school or boys or whatever when I was a teenager, then I knew that was working the same way for her, that she was honestly sharing. If we were in the car just driving, and she wouldn't be saying anything or wouldn't tell you how she was really feeling. And I started carrying Legos in the car just for that purpose. And so, it was our vehicle, not only for communication, but for connection, just as the Lego bricks themselves. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad
to keep that connection. Yeah.
It is. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're sharing your story and this work with other people. It's really what we need. You talked about it before. It's not a death sentence. There's a lot of good that can come from that. And any last bit of encouragement you'd like to share with people before we go?
Sure. Just to never give up hope. Just find the joy in every day, or in my case, every 30 minutes, because that's what I get right now, until COVID goes away, then you can stay all day again or whatever. But I even put a post up that asks, how much can you get done in 30 minutes?
Yeah.
And people were writing all kinds of stuff down. It sounds like 30 minutes, but instead of griping about it, you have fun doing the 30 minutes. We take pictures, we laugh. I remember the first selfie we took right before the lockdown. We were doing this selfie, and she looking at the camera, and she says, "How did we get into that box?"
How do we?
She is a hoot, this woman. And so I keep that picture, and I use it in a lot of my presentations. You can tell by the way she's looking at the camera, she's smiling like, "Oh, that's me." It's hysterical.
Oh.
But and that, I laughed about that for an hour. So, the whole 30-minute thing, you just have to make the most out of what you have. And if it's a day, do a day. And if it's, 15 years, which is where we are, take that. And so I think we lose hope. My tagline on my website says, I help caregivers move from I give up to I got this.
Yeah.
That's how I live.
Yeah, they've got this with your support and great encouragement and humor. I think we all need to have a little humor too in our day.
We do.
We do. Well, okay, tell people where we can find more about what you do and connect with you. Where's a good spot for that?
So my website is probably the best. It's lorettaveney.com. That's really easy. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. I try to share Monday motivations with Lego bricks, and so I do all of that. So you can see me and Wonder Woman, as they have called her on Facebook. Me and Wonder Woman. I'm Loretta Veney on Facebook and Instagram. So
Oh, so good. Thank you so much. And
Thank
we'll
you so
include
much, Nicole,
that.
for having me.
Yeah, yes. It was just a joy, and thank you for your time.
My favorite word.
Yeah, mine too. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.